it's too late now. It needs to be one of the tools in the toolbox, absolutely. There's also a vulnerability for carbon pricing, is we've still not established how you link the carbon price into the decarbonisation pathways. And one of the things we're looking at in the World Economic Forum is creating a Centre for Carbon Markets and Net Zero, to really look at how do you make that link. And there's been some interesting conversations going on around linking maybe some of the allocations and the carbon price into the SBTI or some of the roadmaps we're developing in Mission Possible. Because if you can do that, it can play a really important role. For example, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the harder to abate industries will not be delivering their big emissions cuts in the 2020s. What they need to be doing is making those investments, developing and scaling the technologies to deliver the cuts in the 2030s and 2040s. But they will come under a lot of pressure in the 2020s to reduce emissions. And that's a role that carbon credits can play alongside a credible and robust net zero decarbonisation strategy. We've got to link those two. I think that is critically important. In that context, I think they can play a really important role. But if we don't do that link, there's going to be this constant, and I think deserved criticism if you do not link net zero pathways with carbon pricing.
Excellent point.
Point here, because I think it's important. I mean, all of that needs to happen. But one has to realize, well, one way or another, that is going to add a layer of cost into the overall energy value chain. A cost that somebody has got to pick up, unless we find creative way of actually creating additional revenue stream as a result of sort of the decarbonization technology that we're deploying. I mean, back to the example of carbon black, but there are many others. Because sort of the dilemma, and I'm kind of, for once, I think, incredibly sympathetic to governments. It's easy to ask, put a regulation up. But every regulation has got a cost. And that cost is going to have to be borne by somebody. And if it's not the government, whether it's because of the last 10 years of fiscal policy or the pandemic, the balance sheets of the governments are pretty stretched. So they can't shoulder necessarily all that much. And therefore, the affordability question that Christian raised, it becomes a very sensitive point for government to deal with, because to issue a regulation then all of a sudden creates sort of price pressures over and above driving inflation, but it creates a burden on the people that use energy, is a difficult argument to resolve. And the system solution becomes important in coming together, the policy, the regulation, the technology, the commercial models, to then have a view as to how do we fund the incremental cost of cleaning up sort of the air above us.
Christian,
and I think that shouldn't be underestimated.
Your comments, and then we'll talk a little bit about customer and commercial models. So I think that's the thing we want to circle back around.
I was just wanting to share a glimpse of hope here, because sometimes in these discussions I recognize the difficulty, and it makes me a bit dizzy on, okay, who's going to fix this at the end of the day, and how long is it going to take? But I think actually, and obviously we're drivers of innovation and optimistic by design, but I think industrial decarbonization cannot just be mission possible, it can also be mission profitable. Why am I saying this? Let me give you an example of a project that we do, and then how that pays into the equation. So we talk projects in Belgium, so Central Europe, where Avery Dennison for a production site is basically wanting to replace its gas boilers for generating steam with renewable energy. They choose solar power. So they have solar collectors, and during the day they can generate their process steam now with solar power. Now, that doesn't obviously work at night, even though they produce at night. So here comes Energy Nest with thermal batteries that are being charged during the day as well. And then when the sun is going down and the solar field doesn't work anymore, the production steam comes from the storage. So I think with that project, we'll be able to eliminate 75% of natural gas consumption. Now, what we're seeing is that that can pay out for customers already today. Not every project, not every site, but it can. And last year, we won an investor, a London-based infrastructure fund, Infra Capital, that wants to help us to lower the barriers for customers. What does that mean? We would go in and offer such customers turnkey projects. The customer doesn't pay a thing anymore. The customer now can have a discussion with us about day one savings, because gas is being taken out of the equation, and depending on jurisdiction or country, how you pay for CO2. But it's a cost that goes away. We say basically, okay, let's share those profits. Part is for you to drive other innovation projects in your company, and part is for us to pay down the project, obviously with an interest in order to make this also viable as a business for us. What we see now that this is kind of logic is working for some applications, waste heat recovery. I mean, where you can today offset natural gas, it's almost a no-brainer. It doesn't quite work for every application. So, for instance, electrification of industrial steam, because as long as the storage is being seen as a end consumer and is incorporating, exposed to levies and taxes, that kind of like kills the economics a bit. So, energy storage needs to be more seen as an energy generator. Mm-hmm. And I think policy needs to focus on this, because it's very concrete instances